Recording in progress.
All right. Good morning, everybody. Today is Daf Lamed. It's Levi from yesterday. So we are 5 lines from the top. The number one thing to remember about Tuma is that the more elevated or the holier the item is, the more levels of Tuma there are, right? So typically, right, normally what we say is by Chulin, there's 2 levels. There's a Rishon and a Sheni, Truma, Rishon, Sheni, Shlishi, and by Hektish goes all the way to Revi. So now, Amar Rav Asi, Amar Rav. So it says Rav Asi bar Rav. Ramidon, some say Amar Rav bar Asi, Amar Rav, Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yesi, Shkarech, thank you, Rabbi Yeshua, Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Eliezer. All 5 of these tonight, and even many others, all those, even some of them who are in Brisas or Mishnahs with them. Svir, they all hold the Ein Sheni Isa Shlishi v'Chul. When it comes to Chulin, now items not necessarily, it could be also perhaps Ma'aser Sheni, but right now we're talking about Chulin. Chulin Ein Sheni Isa Shlishi. In other words, if an item is a Sheni and then it comes in contact with another item which is Chulin, it does not transfer any level of Tuma there. It does not make a Shlishi. It doesn't have the power to make other things matam. Now we're going to just list 5 different Mishayos, Abraisas, trying to go ahead and attempting to go ahead and prove it. So Meir says that nan kolatoin bias mai medivrei seifrim. A person who is Tamei midrabanan, really midraisa, they're tahor, but the rabbanan, there's whatever, there's many ways or gezeras. A person is Tamei midrabanan, Matame as a kaidesh, who paisas at shuma umuter bechulin, umaiser. Divrei Meir says Meir, he is Matame kodesh. Now, a person is Matame kodesh, right? So when you Matame kodesh, that means you make something Tamei, which has the level to make the item after if that comes in contact with something else, tummy. Okay. In other words, so therefore that gives that the ability to be tummy. So therefore he's like a sheni. Therefore, but it comes to kodesh, basically it will make a shlishi, which could then go ahead and passel a revi kodesh. Truma. Upaisas a truma, and he passes truma. In other words, if he touches something which is truma, then that now becomes shlishi, but it can't passel anything else. Umuter bechulin. And therefore, and one who goes ahead and comes in contact, right? If he's a shady, comes in contact. The chulin it comes mutter. It does not make it further puzzle. And therefore, we see over there that ein sheni ayis shlishi. Divrei Meir Chachamim say no. They say that since he himself is tamei, therefore he can't go ahead and eat meiser. But they don't necessarily argue with Rabbi Meir in the point that we're trying to make. So not only does really Rabbi Meir hold Ein Sheni Eisa Shlishi, but even the Chachamim don't necessarily argue. They just argue that somebody who is he can't eat it. Right. And Rabbi Yossi, Hada Amra and Rabbi Yossi, we mentioned earlier yesterday, the Isa, because yesterday there was logic brought from Mechusik Kippurim, a person who and it's full yom, and we use those for kavachaimers. So Adam the imise laisi l'ravi b'truma v'chamishi b'kaidish. Because if remember it moves levels, and if we would basically elevate it that chulin becomes shlishi, then from those kavachaimers, then truma would become would potentially be ravi, and kodesh could even be a chamishi. But we didn't say that, so therefore, obviously, that chulin cannot become a shlishi. Chulin can only become a sheni. And Rabbi Yeshua, and where is the opinion of Rabbi Yeshua? The Tanai in the Mishnah, Rabbi Eliezer, Aimer ha'eichel Rishon. One who goes ahead and eats eichel, which is a Rishon, he himself becomes a Rishon L'Tuma. And Sheni, if it's a Sheni, Shlishi. You are what you eat. Thank you. You are what you eat according to Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Yeshua, Aimer, no. Ha'eichel Rishon, v'eichel Sheni. One who goes ahead and eats either Eichel Rishon or a Sheni, then he is a Sheni. Shlishi. If he eats a Shlishi, then if he eats something which is a Shlishi, then Sheni b'Kodesh. Then so it comes to matters of Hekdesh, he becomes a Sheni, right? Which is unique. So he eats a Shlishi, he is a Sheni. The ain't Sheni b'Truma. and there is no sheni b'truma. And b'chulin, and if he goes and he's b'chulin shenasa al taras truma. So he said over here now. So what are we talking about over here? We're talking about what does it mean that he can't go ahead and have it? B'chulin shenasa al taras truma. So we're talking about chulin that was made al taras truma. In other words, that person. There were times where people kept their even chulin. Right, there's certain levels you have to be zahir, be careful for. So they would keep all their chulin because they would eat truma. I guess the house of kohanim. So they would go ahead and keep everything, even the chulin levels of truma. So if over there,
so a person eats something that's sheni, they become a
so
sheni?
it's machlokas, right? According to Rebbe, the first opinion of Rebbe Eliezer was yes, what you are, what you eat. That was the first opinion, right? That was the easy one, right? Rishon, sheni, shlishi, shishi. Rabbi Yeshua says if you eat a rishon or a sheni, you become a sheni, right? A shlishi, and we'll soon see how it becomes. Then you become a sheni b'kodesh, but not sheni b'truma. Only when it comes to in other words, you don't become anything, but when it comes to the gabi truma. But sheni b'kodesh, what do you mean? So what are we talking about? B'chulin shenas al taras truma. What does it mean? That he it's sheni b'truma. It means the gabi chulin shenas al taras truma. So it's so it's talking about chulin al taras truma in al taras hekdesh lo, right? But not something that becomes that not something that if he wanted to keep all his chulin right to level of a hekdesh, then there's not really such thing. You're not such a tzaddik, and therefore we don't hold that to be effective. So Alma, what do you see from over here from the Yeshua? Right? That only that which was normal, that chulin that was nasa, right? Al taras truma, there was he becomes a sheni. But a regular chulin, right? He goes ahead and has a shlishi. It's nothing. So you see over there that there is no shlishi when it comes to regular chulin. And Rabbi Elazar, what does he say? The Tanya, Rabbi Eliezer, Shleishton Shavin, that really all three types of levels, actually similar what we started off with, are similar. What do you mean? Harishon, if something is a rishon, so something, something which is a rishon, right? So it affects kodesh, chulin, and truma. How so? Matame. So it says matame shnayu payis v'yachad. The kodesh. When it comes to kodesh, so it's matame too. In other words, it makes a sheni and a shlishi, and then that the second one. In other words, the second one, the shlishi, which is the second one, right, can passel. In other words, that makes a revi when it comes to kodesh. And matame yechad upayis le'echad b'truma, and it also gives the levels of it is matame one level, i.e., it makes a sheni, and then it can passel, and it can make truma shlishi. And it only can pass a chulin. So if it's a rishon and comes in contact with chulin, then it's only a sheni, but it does not make a shlishi. So you see clearly over here that Rabbi Elazar holds that there is no shlishi b'chulin. And Rabbi Eliezer, and what does Rabbi Eliezer say? The time we learn in the Mishnah, Rabbi Eliezer, you can actually go ahead and separate chala tahira from dough that was tamei. Ketzad, how so? So you have two doughs, one tar, one tameya. So naitel kadei chala meisa shlo hurma chalasa. So he goes ahead, he goes to the tar one, and he wants to go ahead and take it from that one for the tameya one, and he separates the right shear, and he takes it. So naitel kadei meisa shlo hurma. So in that piece, you have to make sure that the tahor dough was not separated from challah yet, right? So that was also still. So you take from there shalahumer chalasa, the nice and pachas mikabeya. You take a small piece less than the kabetza, be'emsa. You put it down next to kadei alita mina mukaf. In order to basically to go ahead and bridge between the two. Yeah. All right, you bridge between the two. So you have your tameh, your tar, and you have that little bridge. All right, now. So what? In other words, what? So you're allowed to go ahead and basically separate the two. So therefore, that now the other part, even though the first one is tameh, we'll soon see, and then it's connected, touching this, and then touching another piece. So therefore, that'll be okay.
Okay.
He wants to separate.
He's got
He has two doughs. He has two doughs.
from a tame and a tahor.
Correct. So he wants to go ahead and separate challah, which is tahira, on behalf of the tameya, right? In order for it to be usable to the kohanim, right? In order to give it right for it to be tahor.
He makes something that's.
He takes a piece. He takes a piece off there, and he puts
bridges
less than a kabetza in between the two. So therefore, they're now connected because you have to take it from the dough, right? But I
Right.
can't take it from. So I can't put them together because it's tamiyat,
Yeah,
right? So
right.
you can make a little bridge, a little little piece of dough is the bridge as long as less than a kabetza. Time say you can't do that. Doesn't work. It's going to be metami. We'll soon see why. Metanya, we actually even another verse that says kabetza. Can actually be even size of kabetza. Now, the normal to transfer tuma, but the food has to be a right size. So, according to this brisa, it could even be the size of something that potentially transfers over tuma. So, so both of them hold, right? Then when it comes to the Isri, both the what's a Batani kabetza. So, it's for both of them, the right, the Isa Rishayna. Like right? That they both hold that in this case that we're talking about dough that was what was the tuma here, right? That was a risha, right? Bisa rishayna. So that was the tvei was rishayna, right? And the chulin and challah is not like challah. Now, challah is an elevated level of tuma, but this dough that we're talking about that is tahira is considered to be like chulin. All right, it's not like challah. Okay, so there's shaila as dough that you have not separated challah from yet. Does it have an extra level of kedusha like challah, or is it just like regular chulin? So we're going to set up this machlokes as the tmeya piece was basically a rishon. The tahira piece is basically chulin. Now what's machlokes? My lab hakamifli the ma'asav ein sheni ayis shlishi b'chulin. That the one who says, Rabbi Eliezer says, you can go ahead and do it. Why? Because the Rishon will make that little bridge. We'll call that the bridge piece, right? The Rishon will make the bridge piece a Sheni, and the Sheni will go ahead and potentially make the Tahar one Shlishi. Now, if you say there's no such thing as a Shlishi, so it's still Tahira, so therefore I can go ahead and separate Challah from there. It's perfect, right? But if you hold that it does make a Shlishi, now that dough I just made Tameya, and therefore I'm not banging Tahira al Tameya. So is that the machlekes? The Marsav and Shina says Shlishi b'chulin. Well, Marsav and the Chachamim say no. Shina says Shlishi b'chulin. So Rav Mari B'rei Rav Kana no. The Kuli Alma ain't Shina says Shlishi. Maybe you can say everybody holds right that there's no Shlishi b'chulin. So if that's the case, why would the Rabbanan say it's no good? Maybe they're arguing as to dough that you have not taken challah from. What is the status of that dough? Is there an elevated kedusha? Is it like regular chulin or is it not? One says that it's like challah, right? And therefore the Chachamim say it's like challah, and therefore there's an elevated level of kedusha, and therefore you cannot go ahead and bridge it to the rishon. No, it's not an elevated level of challah. It's just regular dough until you take challah from it, and therefore, right, and that only the small piece you take out is the kedusha, and therefore it's like chulin, and everyone holds that sheni ain't always shlishi. Or if say, but the kuliyama chulin. Everyone holds that tahira piece is regular chulin. And two does not make a three. A sheni does not make a shlishi. So why would the Chachamim say it's no good? Over here, they're arguing as to whether you're allowed to make anything tameya in Eretz Yisrael. In other words, by making a bridge, you're making a sheni l'chulin. Right, you are doing that. You're not going to use that piece as your challah, but you are making that bridge piece tamik. You're making it a shady.
Both doughs.
Yeah.
Are chulin. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Both of them. One is tameh, one is tahor.
Right.
So Rabbi Eliezer says, okay, just put a bridge piece in between, then you can take challah from the tahor al tameya. And I'm going to say, you're right, you can do that, but the only issue is now you're making that bridge piece, you're making it tummy. And he holds, you're not allowed to go ahead and be goyrein, cause tula on Eretz Yisrael. So Mar Saver Mutaligram Tula Lechulin Shabar Yisrael. Oh, Mar Saver also Ligram Tula Lechulin Shabar Yisrael. And what it says, you're not allowed to go ahead and cause anything to become tamei in Eretz Yisrael, and therefore by purposely putting that bridge piece in order to take chalaf of the Hayral Tameya, you now have done that, and therefore the Chum say they said ask her to do this technique.
Why don't you just take some from the actual tummy parts and bridge it between the two?
Because that's a rishon, that's a rishon, and that's a rishon, then you make that part shady. Fine. So that was the Tuhuma. So if you did not appreciate those sugyas, then we're done. Like to be, I guess, right? Because you take maybe you take a bigger shear. If let's say it was larger, right? But assuming that you take the appropriate shear onto from one onto the other. Fine. So then we continue in the Mishnah. If you recall the Mishnah, where it says Babi Yom was many drushes in that day when they opened up the base medrash, and it had a couple of drushes of Rabbi Akiva. And so there was a steer in the psukim. One says that there was outside the cities of the Levim, there was 1,000 amos, and the pasuk says there was 2,000 amos. So which one was it? So one of them says one of them had to do with Tchum Shabbos, right? One of them was Tchum Shabbos was 2,000. So what was machlokes there? So I think it was Rabbi Akiva, right? I don't recall it was in the Mishnah, right? He was the one who says that which it said 2,000 was referring to the Tchum Shabbos. So therefore, you see, according to Rabbi Akiva, right, Tchum Shabbos actually is a daraisa, or is a daraisa concept Tchum Shabbos in terms of a person being able to walk beyond right his town. And then it holds, no, the pasuk was not talking about that. I was talking about something else, about growing and leaving open. So therefore, it's only the Rabbanim. And Rabbanim Babiyam Darash Rabbi Akiva B'Sha Sha'olu Yisrael Min Hayam, when they left the left Mitzrayim, they went to the Yamsuf Nosnu Eidem Lemar Shira. Right, they said they had to say Shira. The Kates and Amashuna, how they say Shira. Kagadol Hamakares Halal, like a gadol who's reading Halal. V'Hein Einim Acharav Reishei Prakah. So like a gadol says halal, knows like we say halal, right? You go over there. So basically a gadol would say he'd sort of be yatsi others, and he would say it, and they would say it together. Rashi Praka, basically the first word they say haluka. Then he'd say the entire paragraph, and they go haluka, right? And then he say another one haluka. So Moshe Amar Ashir Lashem. So instead of using haluka, so they said the shira like the way halal was said. So they would say Moshe Amar Ashir Lashem. The Hey Naimim Ashir Lashem. They would say Ashir Lashem. Moshe Amar Kigaga, Ve'inamrim Ashir Lashem, and they would say Ashir Lashem like one would say Hallelujah. Right?
They would repeat the first.
They would just say Ashir Lashem.
Ashir Lashem.
Right. That was their thing. Right. And Rabbi Eliezer ben Oishar b'Yisrael Glili Aimer Kekatan Hamakar is Hal. Right. Another like a katan who is saying Hallel. Right. Hey Naimim Acharav Kol Mash Shu Aimer. Right. So therefore, like a katan who's leading, he can't be mitzi the others, so therefore he can't just say haluka to a katan. So therefore you have to go ahead and say everything. So Moshe Amar Shir LaHashem, Ve'einayim Shir LaHashem. So Moshe says Shir LaHashem, so they repeated it. Moshe Amar Kigoga, Ve'einayim Kigoga. All right, and then they also repeated the same words because they couldn't be mitzi with with Moshe. They could have been right, but they said along like one who can't be mitzi from a katan. Right? No, like a sefer or a teacher who's part of Shema Beis HaKnesses. In other words, he starts off Shu Pesach Tchila V'Hein Aimim Acharav. He starts off and then they go ahead and continue. Basically, almost like the way we daven, right? You start off, Yichavod. Everyone says Yichavod. And then Asher. Everyone says Asher, right? So everyone says it to themselves.
They all have the Ruach HaKodesh to know the Shira at the same time.
I guess right. He started, yeah. So my kamiflagi, so Akiva Imer Saver Laymor. It says Laymor. And Milsa Kamaisa. That which says Laymor, like saying, what do they say? In other words, they said the original words. Well, the first words, Ashir LaHashem. So they kept on saying Ashir LaHashem, Ashir LaHashem, Ashir LaHashem after every stanza. No, Laymor Akal Milsa Milsa. Laymor is saying means each and every item. So he said Ashir Hashem, they say Ashir Hashem. They say Kigoga, they say Kigoga. And now they repeat. And Nehemiah, who says that you just start off and do Savar Vayomru, right? It says Vayomru. Damar Lakula Bahadi Adari says, the Yomim, really that's the essence. In other words, they all said it together, right? At the same time. And Lamor, the Pasuk Moshe. I was going to say Lamor means that Moshe started off, and then everyone, jumped in and said it along with it. And they said they're asked to go ahead and say the Ketzad house of Amr Shira. So he had a toddler on the lap of his mother, or a child nursing from his mother. Kevan Sharois Ashchina, right? These katanim, these babies, once they saw the presence of the Shechina, right? All of a sudden they caught their attention, right? The toddler got up, the baby stopped nursing. And they said, and they said, right, this is Zekili Ben Beyu, right? This is baby's talking, yeah. So they said, right, so it said, right, this is Hashem, and we'll glorify him, right? Shneimar says, so from the pasuk here that they say even those who were nursing and those infants, they turned and they also praised Hashem. And how do you know? You think that was tough, right? For a baby to talk, you see, even the ubrim, the fetuses, right, or the babies, right, the fetuses in their mother's womb. So Amr Shira, how do you know they said Shira? Shnamar the pasuk says. Makelos Baruch Elokim Hashem Makor Yisrael, right? So it says when they're all gathered together Alayom, then they praise from the Makor. So what's the Makor? That is referring to the womb of the mother, and then we'll skip the parentheses and we'll stop with the two dots. So, yeah, yeah,
I know. It makes no sense.
Fine. So fine. So tomorrow was today's Friday, right? So Sunday, 6